I was just a struggling nurse until the day they forced me to marry a comatose Mafia boss as part of their family's scheme. But when he unexpectedly woke up and looked into my eyes, I had to ask myself, was I his unwilling captive? Or had I finally found the dangerous adventure my heart secretly craved all along? I never thought my life would become a crazy story. 3 months ago, I was just Sophia, a tired nurse at City Hospital. I worked long hours to pay off my school loans. My tiny apartment had a leaky sink that the owner wouldn't fix, and my social life was just quick coffee with work friends before falling into bed. Every day felt the same: checking patients, giving medicine, and trying to ignore the feeling that there had to be more to life than this endless loop of work and sleep. I was stuck in a rut so deep I couldn't see over the edges anymore. "You need to get out more," my roommate Jess would say while I sat on our old couch looking at my phone. I watched other people's exciting lives through little square pictures that made my own seem dull in comparison. "Come to this party with me tonight." But I always said no. I had to work in the morning, and being responsible was something my parents taught me from a young age. My mom and dad came to this country with nothing but hope. They worked so hard so I could have a better life. I couldn't let them down by being careless. Still, when I was alone at night, I wondered if I'd ever feel something real, something that would make my heart race for reasons other than too much coffee. The hospital walls were the same pale green every day. The smell of cleaning products mixed with the scent of hospital food. The sound of machines beeping filled the air. This was my world. Safe, clean, and completely boring. My boss, Nurse Linda, always gave me the hardest cases because I never complained. "You're so reliable, Sophia," she'd say as she handed me another chart. I smiled and took it every time, even when I was dead on my feet. My parents would visit on Sundays, bringing homemade food to my small apartment. My mom would look around with worried eyes. "When will you find a nice man? When will you give us grandchildren?" My dad would pat her hand and tell her to give me time, but I could see the same question in his eyes. At night, I'd stand by my window, looking at the city lights. People were out there living big lives, taking risks, falling in love, having adventures. I pressed my hand against the cool glass and felt the distance between me and that exciting world. "Someday," I whispered to myself, "something will happen. Something has to change." If only I had known how quickly life can flip upside down. If only I had known that boring can shatter in a single night. If only I had known that my wish for excitement would come true in the most dangerous way possible. Sometimes the things we wish for come with a price we never thought we'd have to pay. The night everything changed started like any other shift. The hospital halls were quiet at 2 a.m., with only the soft beeping of machines and the squeak of my shoes on the clean floor. I was tired but moving through my tasks like I always did, checking patients, fixing IVs, writing notes. Then the emergency doors burst open. Loud voices filled the quiet space as doctors and nurses rushed to help. I heard snippets as I peered down the hall. Multiple gunshot wounds, found behind the Italian restaurant downtown. No ID. Losing blood fast. I wasn't assigned to the emergency team that night, but an hour later, Nurse Linda found me in the break room. Her face looked tight with worry. "Sophia, we have a new patient for you in room 412. He's stable, but unconscious. Gunshot wounds and head trauma. He needs constant watching." When I walked into room 412, I stopped in the doorway, surprised by what I saw. Most of our patients were older folks or regular people. But this man didn't fit. Even lying still and hooked up to machines, he looked powerful. His face was strong but badly bruised. His body was tall and filled the hospital bed. His hands, resting on white sheets, had small scars across the knuckles. What really caught my eye were the things he still had with him: A torn suit that I could tell had cost more than I made in a month. A fancy watch still on his wrist. And strangest of all, a big gold ring with a design I didn't know. "Who is he?" I asked the doctor who stood checking the man's charts. "John Doe for now," the doctor said. "No wallet, no phone, just these clothes and the jewelry. Police are looking into it." I moved closer to the bed, studying my new patient's face. Despite the bruises and cuts, I could see he was handsome in a rough way. Dark hair, strong jaw, probably in his mid-30s. Not the kind of man you'd expect to find bleeding in an alley. "Any family looking for him?" I asked. The doctor shook his head. "Not yet. But someone like this," he gestured to the expensive watch and ring, "has to have people who'll come looking soon." How right he was. I spent that night checking vitals, adjusting medications, and watching the steady rise and fall of the mystery man's chest. I talked to him sometimes, like I did with all my unconscious patients. "You're going to be okay," I said, even though I didn't know if that was true. The doctors weren't very hopeful about his chances of waking up. I was checking his IV around midnight the next night when the door to room 412 opened. I expected to see a doctor or maybe another nurse. Instead, 3 men in dark suits walked in. They were big, with hard faces and watchful eyes. They looked at me, then at the patient, then back at me. The hair on my arms stood up. These weren't worried family members. They moved like people who were used to others being afraid of them. "This is a restricted area," I said, stepping between them and my patient. My voice came out stronger than I felt. "Only family can visit, and visiting hours ended at 8. The tallest one, with a scar above his eye, spoke first. "We need to talk to Mr. Vitale." So John Doe had a name. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Vitale is in a coma," I explained. "He can't talk to anyone. And unless you're family." "He has no family," the man cut me off. "Except us." Before I could reach for the call button to get security, the door opened again. An older man with silver hair and an expensive suit walked in. Unlike the others, he didn't look scary. He looked like someone's kind grandfather, until I met his eyes. They were cold and calculating. "Nurse," he said my job instead of asking my name. "My name is Salvatore. I'm Mr. Vitale's lawyer and advisor. We need to discuss a private matter that concerns both you and Mr. Vitale." "He needs rest," I insisted. "Whatever business you have can wait until he's better." Salvatore smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm afraid this can't wait. It concerns your family as well." My heart skipped. "My family? What do they have to do with anything?" "Your parents own that little Italian restaurant on Maple Street, correct? Moretti's?" The blood drained from my face. How did he know that? "It would be a shame if something happened to such a lovely place," Salvatore continued, his voice soft but the threat clear. "Fire codes can be so complicated these days." 3 hours later, I sat in a private meeting room down the hall from my patient's room. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the cup of water Salvatore had given me. Around me were Salvatore, 2 men in expensive suits who'd been introduced as lawyers, and a woman with a briefcase who hadn't said a word. "Let me understand this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You want me to marry your boss, who is in a coma, or you'll hurt my parents' restaurant? Why me? Why not someone else?" "Mr. Vitale has some immigration issues that need resolving quickly," Salvatore explained. His voice was calm, like we were discussing the weather and not something crazy. "He needs an American wife. You need your family safe. It's a simple exchange." "And if he wakes up? Then what?" "Then you and he can discuss the terms of your arrangement, or divorce. His choice." Salvatore pushed a folder toward me. "If he doesn't wake up, you'll be a very wealthy widow." "This is insane," I whispered, looking at the papers in front of me. Marriage license, legal documents, power of attorney forms. This is business, Salvatore corrected, and a very generous offer, considering the circumstances. What circumstances? The fact that we know who shot Mr. Vitale, he said simply, and that those same people might find your parents' restaurant an easy target if they thought it would hurt him. My mind raced. None of this made sense. Who was this man lying unconscious down the hall? Why would anyone care if he married me? Why would anyone want to hurt my family because of him? I don't understand, I said. Who is he? Who are you people? Salvatore's eyes narrowed slightly. It's better for you not to ask too many questions, Nurse Moretti. Just know that Mr. Vitale is an important man with important business interests, and now, his protection extends to you and your family, as long as you sign these papers. At midnight, with shaking hands and a sick feeling in my stomach, I stood beside Dante Vitale's hospital bed. A judge who seemed far too comfortable with the strange situation stood opposite me. Salvatore and his men watched from the corner as I repeated words that felt like they were coming from someone else's mouth. I do, I whispered, looking at the unconscious face of the stranger who was now, by law, my husband. As a nurse who had taken an oath to help people, I had just made a deal with people I was sure did very bad things. As a daughter who loved her parents, I had just sold myself to keep them safe. When the small, twisted ceremony ended, Salvatore handed me a new ID card and credit cards with a new name on them, Sofia Vitale. Welcome to the family, he said with that same cold smile. I looked down at the gold band now on my finger. It felt heavy, like it was made of chains instead of metal. Be careful what you wish for, I thought bitterly, remembering how I'd longed for excitement in my dull life. Now I had it, and all I wanted was to go back to boring and safe. I woke up the next morning in the small break room at the hospital. For a moment, everything felt normal, the scratchy blanket around my shoulders, the smell of old coffee in the air, the sound of the hospital waking up. Then I felt the strange weight on my left hand. The gold ring caught the early morning light. It wasn't a bad dream. I was married to a man who didn't even know my name. When I went back to Dante's room to check his vitals, two large men stood outside his door. They nodded at me, their eyes scanning my face and the ID badge that now said Sofia Vitale, RN, instead of Sofia Moretti. Overnight, the hospital administration had changed my records. I wondered what kind of power these people had to make that happen so fast. Inside the room, I tried to act normal. I checked Dante's breathing, his heart rate, the machines helping keep him alive. But everything felt different. I wasn't just his nurse anymore. I was his wife. The word felt wrong in my head. Good morning, Mr. Vitale, I said quietly, using his last name even though we were supposedly married. Your vitals look good today. An older nurse I'd worked with for years peeked into the room. Her eyes were wide with questions. Sophia, she whispered. Everyone's talking. Is it true? Did you marry him? My face got hot. It's complicated, Janet. Girl, do you know who he is? Janet came closer, her voice dropping even lower. That's Dante Vitale. His family owns half the businesses downtown. My cousin's husband works for their construction company. She glanced at the door where the guard stood. They say the Vitales are connected, if you know what I mean. My stomach knotted up. Connected. I knew what that meant. The mob. I'd grown up in this city. I'd heard the whispers about certain families, certain businesses. I have to go, I said, brushing past Janet. I needed air. I needed to think. On the hospital roof, I tried to call my parents. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. But when my mom answered, I couldn't tell her the truth. How could I explain I'd married a man in a coma to keep them safe from people who might burn down their restaurant? Sophia, is everything okay? My mom's voice was worried. Everything's fine, Mama, I lied. Work is just busy. I'll try to visit this weekend. After my shift ended, I found Salvatore waiting for me in the parking lot, leaning against a black car so shiny it looked wet. Mrs. Vitale, he said, opening the back door. Time to go home. My apartment is just 2 blocks away. I can walk. Your apartment has been packed up. Your things are being moved to Mr. Vitale's penthouse as we speak. My heart dropped. You can't just... We can. Salvatore cut in. And we have. Your lease has been terminated. Your new home awaits. The drive took only 15 minutes, but it felt like we crossed into another world. The buildings got taller, the streets cleaner. We pulled up to a glass tower that seemed to touch the clouds. A doorman rushed to open my door. Welcome home, Mrs. Vitale, he said with a small bow. The elevator needed a special key to reach the top floor. When the doors opened, I stepped into a place that looked like it was from a fancy magazine. The floors were shiny wood. The ceilings were higher than my whole apartment. One whole wall was just windows, showing the entire city spread out below like a toy town. This is... I couldn't find the right words. You're home now, Salvatore finished for me. The master bedroom is upstairs. We've prepared the guest room across the hall for you until Mr. Vitale returns. A small woman with gray hair appeared, her hands folded in front of her. This is Maria, Salvatore explained. She manages the household. Anything you need, ask her. When Salvatore left, Maria showed me around. The kitchen was bigger than my parents' whole restaurant, with shiny tools I didn't know how to use. There were 6 bathrooms, each one bigger than my old bedroom. There was a gym, a movie room, and an office with dark wood furniture. And this, Maria said, opening a door upstairs, will be your room. The space was bigger than my whole apartment, with a bed that could fit 4 people. The closet was already filled with clothes, all in my size. Shoes lined one wall, jewelry sat in glass cases. These aren't mine, I said, touching a silky dress that probably cost more than I made in a month. Mr. Salvatore said to tell you that Mrs. Vitale must dress the part. Maria's eyes were kind but sad, like she understood more than she was saying. Dinner is at 7, unless you prefer another time. Left alone, I sat on the edge of the huge bed, feeling small and lost. The ring on my finger caught the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the sun was setting over the city, painting everything gold and pink. It was beautiful, but it felt like I was looking at it from inside a cage. A very fancy, expensive cage. I tried to call my best friend Lisa, but the call went to voicemail. I wanted to tell someone what was happening, but the words sounded crazy even in my head. I married a mob boss in a coma. I live in his penthouse now. People with guns watched the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet without the usual street noise from my apartment. Around midnight, I got up and wandered through the huge, dark penthouse. I found myself in Dante's office looking at the pictures on his desk. Dante shaking hands with the mayor. Dante at a charity event. Dante with an older man who had his same strong jaw and dark eyes. I picked up a framed newspaper article. Vitale Foundation donates $5 million to Children's Hospital. The picture showed Dante cutting a ribbon, smiling for the cameras. He didn't look like a bad person in that moment. He looked normal, maybe even good. My phone rang, making me jump. It was Salvatore. Mrs. Vitale. His voice was tight. There's been a development. You need to come to the hospital right away. My heart raced as I rushed to put on clothes. Had Dante died? Was I already a widow? Part of me felt guilty for the tiny spark of hope that thought brought. If he died, Maybe this weird arrangement would end and I could go back to my normal life. But when I got to the hospital, almost running down the hall to room 412, I found Dante still alive. Salvatore stood by the bed with a doctor I hadn't seen before. "What's happening?" I asked, automatically checking the monitors. Dante's vital signs were stronger than they had been. "He showed response to stimuli," the doctor explained. He squeezed Nurse Johnson's hand when she asked him to. "It's a good sign. He may be starting to wake up." Salvatore's face gave nothing away, but I saw his shoulders relax slightly. "That's very good news." I looked down at Dante's face. The bruises were starting to fade to yellow and green. Without the swelling, I could see his features better. Strong cheekbones, dark eyebrows, a small scar near his mouth. He was handsome in a dangerous way, like a sleeping tiger. "Can I have a moment with him?" I asked. When the others left, I sat in the chair beside the bed. I should check his vitals, adjust his IV, do my job. Instead, I found myself studying the face of the man I had married. Who was he, really? What would he think when he woke up and found out what had happened while he slept? "Hello, Dante," I said quietly, trying out his first name. "I'm Sofia. Sofia Moretti. Well, Sofia Vitale now, I guess. We got married while you were sleeping. Crazy, right? I hope you're not the kind of guy who gets mad and hurts people when things don't go your way." I hesitated, then reached out to check his pulse the old-fashioned way, with my fingers on his wrist. His skin was warm, his pulse strong and steady. As I held his wrist, his fingers suddenly curled around mine, just a little, just enough to tell me he was still in there somewhere, fighting his way back. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a reflex. Somehow, I knew he was listening, even if he couldn't respond. "I'll be here when you wake up," I promised, not sure why I said it. "We'll figure this out together." As I left his room, I saw Salvatore watching me with curious eyes. I stood straighter, lifted my chin, and walked past him without a word. I was starting to realize that in this new world I'd been pushed into, showing fear would be dangerous. If I was going to survive this, if my family was going to stay safe, I needed to be strong. I needed to become the Mrs. Vitale they expected me to be, at least on the outside. Inside, I would still be Sofia, the nurse who cared for people, who believed in helping others. I just had to figure out how to be both at once. Weeks passed, and my life fell into a strange new pattern. Days at the hospital with Dante, nights alone in his huge penthouse. I was living two lives, nurse by day, mob wife by night, and I didn't really fit in either one anymore. At the hospital, the other nurses kept their distance. I saw them whispering when I walked by. Only Janet still treated me normally, bringing me coffee during long shifts and asking how I was holding up. "They're just jealous," she told me one night as we sat in the break room. "You married a millionaire, a handsome one too, even if he is, you know." She made a face that meant in a coma. I didn't correct her. I couldn't explain that my marriage was just a business deal made under threats. That my new husband might never wake up. That I wasn't sure if I wanted him to. But slowly, I found myself getting curious about the man I'd married. When I wasn't checking his vitals or giving him medicine, I'd talk to him. At first, it was just medical stuff, explaining what I was doing. Then I started telling him about my day, about the weather, about books I was reading. "You have a lot of books in your penthouse," I told him one afternoon as I adjusted his pillows. "I didn't expect that. I've been reading some of them. You like history and philosophy. I'm more into mysteries and romance, but I tried that big book on your nightstand. It's actually pretty interesting." Sometimes I imagined he could hear me. Once or twice his fingers would twitch or his eyes would move under his closed lids when I spoke. The doctors said it was just reflexes, but I wasn't so sure. At night, I explored the penthouse, trying to learn about the man I'd married through his things. His closet held expensive suits in dark colors, but also worn jeans and soft sweaters. His bathroom had simple soap and shampoo, not fancy stuff like I expected. His kitchen barely looked used. I guessed he ate out a lot or had someone cook for him. His bookshelf told me the most. History books, philosophy, classic novels worn from being read many times, poetry, which surprised me, and photographs. Dante with important-looking people at fancy parties. Dante with the older man I now knew was his uncle who had raised him. Dante looking serious in most pictures, except one where he was laughing with Salvatore at what looked like a baseball game. He seemed almost normal in that one. Maria, the housekeeper, caught me looking at the photos one evening. "He's not what people think," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" I asked. She just smiled sadly and shook her head. "You'll see, if he wakes up. Mr. Dante has many sides." Dante's condition improved slowly. First came small movements, fingers twitching, eyes moving under closed lids. Then more brain activity on the scans. The doctors started using words like promising instead of uncertain. And then, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, it happened. I was checking his IV when I felt someone watching me. I looked down and met Dante Vitale's open eyes for the first time. They were dark brown, almost black, and sharply aware. Not confused like most patients when they first wake up. He was looking right at me, his gaze steady and focused. My heart jumped into my throat. "You're awake," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and professional. "I'm Sophia, your nurse." I couldn't bring myself to say wife, not when he was looking at me with those clear, questioning eyes. He tried to speak, but the breathing tube was still in. I called for the doctor, and the next hours were busy with tests and checks as they removed the tube and assessed his condition. Through it all, Dante's eyes followed me around the room. When the doctors finally left, I approached his bed, nervous but trying to hide it. "Water," he rasped, his voice rough from weeks of not being used. I held the cup with a straw to his lips, noticing how dry and cracked they were. He drank slowly, his eyes never leaving my face. "Sophia," he said when he finished, testing my name. "The nurse." I nodded, twisting my hands together. The ring caught the light, and his eyes dropped to it, then back to my face. "You're wearing my family ring." I swallowed hard. "Yes. About that? While you were unconscious, there was an arrangement made." Before I could explain, Salvatore burst into the room, his usually calm face lit up with rare emotion. "Dante, you're back with us." He gripped Dante's hand, then seemed to remember himself and stepped back, straightening his suit. "We have much to discuss." "Later," Dante said, his voice still weak but with a tone that expected to be obeyed. "I'm talking with my nurse." Salvatore glanced between us, his eyes lingering on my ring. "Of course, I'll return this evening." At the door, he paused. "It's good to have you back, my friend." When we were alone again, Dante struggled to sit up. I moved to help him, adjusting pillows behind his back. "Tell me," he said simply. So I did. All of it. The threats, the arrangement, my family. His expression remained neutral throughout my explanation, giving nothing away. "Salvatore's idea," he said when I finished. His voice was stronger now. Always practical. "Are you angry?" I asked cautiously. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Intrigued?" He studied me with new interest. "Most would have run. They threatened my family. And you stayed even after they were safe." His eyes were shrewd, missing nothing. "Why?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't realized it myself until that moment. I could have arranged protection for my parents and disappeared weeks ago. Yet I hadn't. You needed care, I said simply. That's my job. Something shifted in his expression. Sit with me. That night became the first of many conversations as Dante regained his strength. His voice grew stronger every day, his mind sharp and quick. He asked about my care of him, about the hospital, about small details of my life. In turn, he told me about his childhood in Sicily, about coming to America with his uncle at age 10. He talked about his businesses, carefully edited, I was sure, and his plans for the future. You're wasted as a nurse, he told me one evening as I helped him stand up for the first time. His legs were wobbly from weeks in bed, and he leaned heavily on my shoulder. I love nursing, I replied, supporting his weight as we took small steps around the room. Because you like helping people or controlling them? His question wasn't mean, just curious and surprisingly insightful. I'd never thought of it that way. Maybe both. He laughed, the first time I'd heard the sound, and something warm bloomed in my chest at the deep, rich noise. As Dante grew stronger, our relationship shifted. I was still his nurse, but also something else. Not quite a wife, but no longer a stranger. He watched me with those dark eyes that seemed to see everything, including things I tried to hide. One afternoon, I brought flowers for his room, simple daisies from the hospital shop. He watched as I arranged them in a cup. No one's brought me flowers before, he said. Really? Not even girlfriends? In my world, people bring other things. Money, favors, loyalty. He touched a white petal gently. Not flowers. I started bringing small things after that. Books from his shelves that I thought he'd like, a better pillow from the penthouse. Homemade cookies my mother had baked. I told her they were for a patient, not my coma husband. Our breakthrough came unexpectedly. Dante had a nightmare that left him thrashing in bed, tearing open the stitches in his side. I rushed in to find him sweating and disoriented, blood seeping through his hospital gown. Without hesitation, I got to work, cleaning the wound, applying pressure, calling for the doctor. My hands never shook, my voice stayed calm. Blood didn't scare me. Pain didn't make me flinch. As I redressed the wound, Dante watched me with new respect in his eyes. You're not afraid of this, he said softly. The violence, the blood. I'm a trauma nurse, I reminded him. I see worse than this every day. No. He caught my hand, pressing it against his chest where I could feel his heart beating steadily. You're not afraid of me. Everyone else is. The intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. Before I could respond, the room door burst open. Salvatore rushed in, followed by two of the ever-present guards. Their hands were under their jackets, reaching for what I knew must be guns. We've been compromised, Salvatore announced, his usual calm cracking. The Rossis know you're awake and vulnerable. The Rossis. I'd heard that name whispered by the guards. Another family, rivals to the Vitales. Dante's grip on my hand tightened. Get Sophia out, he ordered. I don't know what surprised me more, the sudden danger or the protective tone in Dante's voice, but I knew what I had to do. No, I said firmly, surprising everyone including myself. I'm staying with my patient. Your husband, Dante corrected, something possessive and fierce flashing in his eyes. As Salvatore barked orders into a phone and the guards took positions at the door and window, I realized my feelings had crossed a line I hadn't seen coming. I wasn't just concerned for my patient anymore. The thought of Dante in danger made my heart race with fear. Not fear of him, but for him. I was still holding his hand, our fingers intertwined on top of the hospital blanket. Neither of us moved to let go. Dante was moved from the hospital to the penthouse the next day. Salvatore arranged everything, private doctors, special equipment, and guards who watched every door and window. Our home became a fortress with men in dark suits talking quietly into their phones and checking everyone who came and went. The top floor of the penthouse had been turned into a recovery room with all the machines Dante might need. I spent my days there, checking his wounds, helping him walk short distances, giving him his medicine. My nursing skills were perfect for this job, but it was different now. I wasn't just his nurse anymore. Each touch felt charged with something new that made my heart beat faster. "You're staring again," Dante said one afternoon as I changed his bandages. He was sitting up in bed, stronger every day. The bruises on his face had faded, showing his handsome features clearly now. "I'm checking for infection," I said quickly, looking away. His fingers caught my chin, tilting my face up to meet his eyes. "Are you? Or are you wondering how you ended up here, playing nurse to a man like me?" I didn't pull away from his touch. "Sometimes I wonder if this is all a crazy dream I'll wake up from." His smile was small, but real. "If it's a dream, we're having it together." Being stuck in the penthouse brought us closer. With nowhere to go and nothing to do except focus on his recovery, we talked for hours. I learned about his childhood in Sicily before his parents died. He told me about coming to America, about the uncle who raised him, about building his businesses one by one. He carefully avoided talking about the darker side of those businesses, and I didn't ask. Some things were better left in the shadows, at least for now. In turn, I told him about growing up in a small apartment above my parents' restaurant, about my dreams of becoming a doctor but settling for nursing school when money got tight. I told him about patients I'd helped, lives I'd saved, the satisfaction of making someone feel better. "You have a healer's hands," he said one evening, holding my palms up to the light. "Strong but gentle." He had a poet's way of speaking sometimes that surprised me. The man the world feared had a softness to him that only I got to see. After 3 weeks of lockdown, I was going stir-crazy. "I need fresh air," I told Dante, "just 10 minutes on the roof deck." He studied me for a long moment. "Take 2 guards with you." The roof garden was my favorite place. Plants in big pots, comfortable chairs, and a view of the whole city. I sat with my face turned up to the sun, eyes closed, pretending I was free for just a moment. The peace was broken by Salvatore clearing his throat behind me. "Mrs. Vitale, may I join you?" I nodded, watching as he sat down carefully in the chair beside me, straightening his perfect suit. "You've been good for him," Salvatore said, looking out at the city instead of at me. "I haven't seen him this content in years." "He's healing well," I said. "I don't mean physically." Salvatore turned to face me. "Dante has lived a hard life, made hard choices. The world he operates in doesn't allow for weakness or trust, but he trusts you." I didn't know what to say to that. I was still figuring out my feelings for Dante. They were complicated. Part fear, part fascination, part something warmer that grew stronger each day. "There are people who don't approve of his softening," Salvatore continued. His voice was casual, but his eyes were serious. "People in our organization, people in rival families, they see his interest in you as weakness." A chill ran down my spine despite the warm sun. "Are you warning me about something?" "I'm informing you of realities." He straightened his tie. "Dante's uncle built this family on certain principles: blood, loyalty, strength. Some people think Dante is straying from those principles. Because of me. Because of changes they see in him since you arrived." Salvatore stood up. "Changes I, personally, find promising, but others disagree." That evening, as Dante and I ate dinner together in his room, his appetite finally returning, I thought about Salvatore's warning. Were we in danger from Dante's own people? From rival families? How had my simple life turned into this tangled web of threats and politics? "You're quiet tonight," Dante observed, setting down his fork. He could eat on his own now, dress himself, walk around the penthouse without help. Soon he wouldn't need me as his nurse at all. "Just thinking," I said. "About?" I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "About us. This situation. What happens next?" His dark eyes studied me. "Are you unhappy here?" "No," I answered truthfully. "But this isn't real life. You're getting better. Soon you'll go back to your business. And I have a job, a career I worked hard for." "You can go back to the hospital whenever you want," he said carefully. "No one is keeping you prisoner here. Aren't they?" I gestured to the window where we could see guards patrolling the grounds below. "I haven't seen my parents in weeks, haven't talked to my friends. I live behind walls and guards." "For protection?" "For whose protection?" I interrupted, surprising both of us with my boldness. "Yours? Mine? Or is it so I can't leave?" Dante's expression darkened. "You think I'm keeping you here against your will? After everything we've shared?" I didn't back down. "I think this started as a business arrangement made under threats. I think the lines have gotten blurry. I think neither of us knows what this is anymore." The silence stretched between us, tense and heavy. Finally, Dante reached for his phone. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Arranging for you to visit your parents." His voice was controlled, giving nothing away. "You'll have guards, of course, but you can spend the day with them tomorrow." My heart leaped at the thought of seeing my family, but I felt guilty too. "Dante, I didn't mean—" "You made your feelings clear," he cut me off. "You feel trapped. I'm opening the door." The next day, I sat in the back of a black car with tinted windows, 2 guards in the front seat. We pulled up to my parents' restaurant just before lunch. The familiar red and green sign made my eyes fill with tears. I'd missed this place. Missed them. My mother screamed when she saw me, running from behind the counter to wrap me in a hug that smelled like garlic and home. "Sophia, where have you been? Why don't you call more? You're too skinny." She patted my face, my arms, checking that I was real. My father came more slowly, wiping his hands on his apron. His hug was gentler, but just as warm. "We've been worried, little one." I sat with them in the back office, trying to explain my new life without telling the whole complicated truth. Dante's been very sick. He needed private nursing care. "And he needed to marry you for that?" My mother's eyes were suspicious. "We're not fools, Sophia. We hear things. The Vitale name is known in this city." "It's not like that," I started, but couldn't finish because I didn't know what it was like anymore. "Is he good to you?" my father asked quietly. "Do you feel safe?" I thought about Dante's gentle hands, his protective fierceness, the way he looked at me when he thought I didn't notice. "Yes, he's good to me. But?" My mother always knew when I was holding something back. "But his world is dangerous," I admitted. "There are people who don't like that we're together. People who might try to hurt him, or me, because of it." My parents exchanged looks filled with worry. "Mi hija," my father said, using the Spanish endearment from my childhood. "What have you gotten yourself into?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Salvatore's name flashed on the screen. My stomach dropped as I answered. "You need to come back now," he said without greeting. "There's been an incident." "What happened? Is Dante okay?" My voice rose with panic. "Someone left a message at the penthouse. For you, specifically." Salvatore's voice was tight. "The Rossi family wants to make sure you understand the danger of your position." "What kind of message?" I asked, though I was afraid I knew. "The kind written in blood," Salvatore said grimly. "Not Dante's, thankfully." but a warning nonetheless. As the car raced back to the penthouse, I stared out the window at the city passing by. How had my simple life as a nurse led here? To blood and threats and danger? To feelings for a man whose world was so different from mine? And most troubling, why didn't I want to run away from it all? Why, despite the danger and complications, did part of me feel more alive than I ever had before? The answer was waiting for me at the penthouse. When I rushed in, Dante was standing in the living room, standing on his own without help, his face tight with anger as he looked at something on the wall. He turned when he heard me, and the relief in his eyes made my heart skip. "You're safe," he said, crossing to me in quick strides and pulling me against him. His arms were strong around me, his heart beating fast under my cheek. "I'm fine," I assured him. "What happened here?" He turned me away from whatever was on the wall. "Nothing you need to see, but things have escalated. The Rossis are sending a message." "To me," I said. "Salvatore told me." Dante's jaw tightened. "This isn't your fight." "It became my fight when I put this ring on," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "When I chose to stay." His eyes searched mine. "Did you choose, Sophia? Really? Or were you forced into this life?" It was the question I'd been asking myself for weeks. Had I chosen this? Or was I just making the best of a situation I couldn't escape? Looking up at Dante, feeling the strength and warmth of him, I realized the truth was somewhere in between. I hadn't chosen to enter his world, but I was choosing to stay. For now. For him. "We can figure that out later," I said instead of answering directly. "Right now, we need to deal with the Rossis. Together." After the warning from the Rossi family, things changed in the penthouse. More guards patrolled the halls. Dante spent long hours in his office with the door closed, his voice sometimes rising in heated arguments with Salvatore and other men I didn't know. I was kept away from these meetings, which both relieved and frustrated me. Dante had fully recovered physically. He no longer needed me as his nurse, which left me wondering what my role was now. Wife in name only? Guest? Prisoner? The question hung between us, unasked and unanswered. One morning, I found a stack of papers on the kitchen counter with a note from Dante. "Your job is still waiting, if you want it." The papers were from the hospital, a formal leave of absence that would let me return to nursing whenever I chose. I sat at the counter, staring at the papers. Did I want to go back? To my small apartment, my simple life, my regular job? It seemed so far away now, like a story I'd read about someone else. That afternoon, Dante found me on the roof garden. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes showing he hadn't been sleeping well. "You didn't sign the papers," he said, sitting beside me. "I haven't decided yet." I looked out at the city spread below us. Part of me misses my old life. It was simpler. Safer. "Happier?" he asked quietly. I thought about that. Had I been happy before? Content, maybe? Comfortable in my routines? But happy? I don't know. "You could have both," Dante suggested. "Work at the hospital, live here. We could make arrangements for your safety." "Is that what you want?" I turned to look at him directly. "Me living here, being your wife, while you run your business?" His expression grew guarded. "What do you know about my business?" "Enough." I gathered my courage. "I know the Vitale family isn't just real estate and restaurants. I know the men who guard this building aren't just security guards. I know the Rossis aren't business rivals." Dante's jaw tightened. "You don't need to concern yourself with that part of my life." "Don't I?" I stood up, suddenly angry. "They left a message in blood on our wall. They're threatening my family. How can you say it doesn't concern me?" "I'm handling it," he said firmly, standing to face me. "That's what I do." "By handling? You mean what? Violence? Threats? More blood? The words spilled out before I could stop them. Is that the world you want me to live in? To raise children in someday? The mention of children, something we'd never discussed, made Dante's expression change. Something like longing flashed across his face before he controlled it. "This is who I am, Sophia," he said, his voice low and intense. "This is the life I was born into, the obligations I inherited. I can't change it, even for you." "Can't or won't?" I challenged. His dark eyes flashed. "Both." That night, I slept in the guest room for the first time since Dante had recovered. We'd been sharing the master bedroom for weeks now, though nothing physical had happened between us beyond holding and kisses. Something had been building between us, slow and careful, but now it felt like we'd hit a wall. I tossed and turned on the too soft mattress, thinking about the two worlds I was caught between. The simple, honest life I'd lived before. The complex, dangerous one I lived now. I missed my job. Missed the satisfaction of helping people. Of making a difference in clear, measurable ways. At the hospital, I knew exactly who I was and what my purpose was. Here, everything was undefined. The next morning, I called the hospital and told them I'd be coming back the following week. When I told Dante over breakfast, his face gave nothing away. "I'll arrange for drivers and security," was all he said. For the next few days, we moved around each other carefully, polite but distant. I felt like I was losing something precious before I'd fully understood what it was. My first day back at the hospital felt strange. Everything was the same: the squeaky floors, the beeping machines, the smell of disinfectant. But I was different. Janet greeted me with a hug and a flood of questions I answered vaguely. "So you're still married to Mr. Money?" she asked, as we changed into our scrubs. "Yes." I twisted the ring on my finger, a habit I'd developed. "But you're back at work?" Janet looked confused. "Don't tell me he lost all his cash." I forced a laugh. "No, I just missed nursing. Missed feeling useful." The day was busy, which helped distract me from my troubled thoughts. By the end of my shift, I felt more like my old self than I had in months. This was where I belonged, helping people who needed me. But as I walked to the parking garage where Dante's driver waited, my steps slowed. Did I really belong at the hospital anymore? Or was I just hiding from the complicated feelings I had for Dante and the life we might build together? At home, and I realized I did think of the penthouse as home now, I found Dante in the kitchen. He was attempting to cook dinner, something I'd never seen him do before. Pans cluttered the counter, and a dusting of flour covered his usually immaculate clothes. "What are you doing?" I asked, unable to hold back a smile at the sight. He looked up, slightly embarrassed. "I thought I'd make your mother's lasagna. You said it was your favorite." He gestured to the mess. "It's not going well." "I can see that." I set down my bag and washed my hands. "Let me help." We worked side by side, my hands guiding his through the steps my mother had taught me years ago. For a little while, it felt like the wall between us had come down. This was the Dante I'd come to care for, the man behind the power and danger, the one who tried to make lasagna because he knew I loved it. As we sat down to eat, Dante poured wine for both of us. "How was your first day back?" "Good." I twirled pasta around my fork. "Busy." "Normal." "And that's what you want?" "Normal?" I set down my fork, sensing this was about more than my job. I want parts of normal. I want to help people, to use my skills. I want to visit my parents without armed guards. I want to not be afraid. "And me?" Dante's voice was carefully neutral. "Do you want me?" The question hung between us, heavy with meaning. I looked at him across the table. This man I'd married as a stranger, nursed back to health, and somehow come to care for despite all the reasons I shouldn't. "Yes," I admitted quietly. "But I'm afraid of what that means, of what I have to accept to be with you." Dante reached across the table, his hand covering mine. I can't change who I am, or the world I come from, but I can try to keep it separate from you. From us. Is that even possible? I asked. After what happened with the Rossis? His expression darkened. I'm handling the Rossis. There it is again, I said, pulling my hand away. Handling. Which means what? Violence? Threats? Creating more enemies who might come after us later? This is how my world works, Sophia, he said, frustration edging his voice. There are rules, expectations. And if I can't live with those rules? If I can't be the wife who looks the other way while her husband does things she can't accept? Dante was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. Then maybe you're right to keep one foot in your old life. That night, as we lay in separate bedrooms, I thought about the path that had led me here. I'd been forced into this marriage, but somewhere along the way, I'd started to choose it, to choose him. Yet now I was pulling back, afraid of fully stepping into his world. The next morning, I found Dante in his study, talking on the phone in rapid Italian. He hung up when he saw me. Another crisis? I asked. Business, he said vaguely. Nothing for you to worry about. That's the problem, I said, sitting across from him. You keep trying to protect me by keeping me in the dark. But I'm already part of this, Dante. The Rossis made sure of that. He rubbed his face, looking tired. What do you want from me, Sophia? Honesty, I said simply. Tell me what we're facing. Let me decide what I can handle. Dante studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The Rossis think I've gone soft since marrying you. They're testing boundaries, moving into our territory. And how do you plan to respond? The old way, he admitted. Show strength. Make them back down. Which means violence. Which means whatever it takes, he corrected. To protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice sent a shiver through me. Part fear, part something else I didn't want to examine too closely. And what about the law? I asked. The police? Dante's laugh was short and without humor. The police are part of the game, Sophia. Some of them, anyway. It was like looking through a window into a world I'd only seen in movies. A world of power, corruption, and danger that operated alongside the normal one I'd always lived in. And the man I was falling in love with belonged to that world completely. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered, voicing the fear that had been growing in me. I don't know if I can be part of this life. Dante's expression softened. He came around the desk and knelt in front of my chair, taking my hands in his. You bring light into my darkness, Sophia. For the first time in my life, I can see a future beyond the family business, beyond the obligations and expectations. A future with you. But can we have that future if you're still... I couldn't finish the sentence. A criminal? He supplied, his voice gentle but unflinching. That's what you're afraid to say, isn't it? That you've fallen in love with a man who breaks the law, who hurts people, who lives by a different code than you do. Tears filled my eyes because he was right. I had fallen in love with him, despite everything, despite knowing what he was. I'm afraid of losing myself, I admitted, of becoming someone who accepts things I once thought were unforgivable. Dante wiped a tear from my cheek. And I'm afraid of losing you, of watching you walk away because I can't be the man you deserve. We stayed like that, his hands holding mine, neither of us knowing how to bridge the gap between our worlds. The next week passed in a strange kind of quiet, like the calm before a storm. I went to work at the hospital, came home to the penthouse, and Dante and I moved around each other carefully, both afraid to break the fragile peace between us. We talked about small things, the weather, my patients, books we were reading, but avoided the big questions hanging over us. Then late one night, my phone rang. It was Salvatore. his voice tight with worry. "Your father's had a heart attack," he said. "He's at St. Mary's. I've already sent a car for you." My whole body went cold. Will he be okay?" "The doctors are with him now. Your mother is there." I grabbed my purse and ran for the door. Dante appeared from his office, alarm on his face when he saw my tears. "Sophia, what's happened?" "My dad," I choked out. "Heart attack. I have to go." "I'll come with you," he said, already reaching for his coat. I stopped, one hand on the door. "No, the hospital will be full of my coworkers, people who know me. How do I explain you? The guards? All of this?" I gestured around us, to the luxury and danger that had become my life. Hurt flashed across his face, quickly replaced by understanding. "You're right. My presence would complicate things." He stepped back. "Go. My men will watch from a distance." The drive to the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I prayed silently, bargaining with God for my father's life. Please let him be okay. Please don't let this be my fault, because in my heart, I feared it was. The stress of worrying about me, about the strange situation I was in, might have been too much for his heart. At the hospital, I found my mother sitting alone in the waiting room, her small hands twisting a tissue into shreds. When she saw me, she stood with a cry and fell into my arms. "They're still with him," she said against my shoulder. "They won't tell me anything." I held her tight, feeling how thin she'd become. Had she been eating properly? Sleeping? I'd been so wrapped up in my own drama that I hadn't been checking on my parents like I should. "Let me talk to the doctors," I said, guiding her back to a chair. "I work here, remember? They'll tell me more." I found my father's doctor, an older man who'd treated many of my patients. He looked tired but not grim, which gave me hope. "It was a mild heart attack," he explained. "We've stabilized him. With medication and lifestyle changes, he should recover well." Relief made my knees weak. "Can I see him?" "He's asking for you," the doctor said with a small smile. "Just a short visit. He needs rest." My father looked small and pale against the white hospital sheets. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped steadily, monitoring his heart. His eyes were closed when I entered, but they fluttered open at the sound of my footsteps. "Sophia," he whispered, reaching one hand toward me. I took it, feeling how cold his fingers were. "I'm here, Papa." I kissed his forehead, fighting back tears. "You scared us." "Your mother?" he asked, his voice weak. "She's fine. Worried about you, of course. She'll come in soon." He nodded, then looked at me closely. "And you? Are you okay? You look tired." Even now, sick in a hospital bed, he was worrying about me. It made my heart ache. "I'm fine, Papa." His eyes searched mine. "This man you've married," he said slowly. "Is he good to you?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about Dante, his gentleness with me, his efforts to make me happy, the darkness in him that both frightened and fascinated me. "Yes," I said truthfully, "he's good to me." "Do you love him?" Such a simple question, but it hit me like a wave. Did I love Dante? The man who'd threatened my family, then protected them? Who moved in a world of violence but touched me with tenderness, whose darkness both frightened and called to something in me I hadn't known existed? "I think I do," I whispered, the admission making my heart race. But loving him means accepting things I don't know if I can live with. My father squeezed my hand weakly. "Then you have to decide what you can live with, Sophia, and what you can't live without." His words stayed with me as I left his room. What could I live with? The knowledge of what Dante did, the dangers of his world? And what couldn't I live without? Dante himself, the connection we'd built, the future we might have together? I found my mother still in the waiting room. He's going to be fine, I assured her, sitting beside her. But he'll need to take it easy. Make some changes. We both will, she said, patting my hand. Maybe it's time to sell the restaurant. Move somewhere quieter. The idea of my parents giving up their dream, the restaurant they'd worked so hard for, made my chest tight with guilt. Don't make any decisions yet, I said. Let's see how Dad recovers. When I finally left the hospital hours later, exhausted and emotionally drained, I was surprised to find Dante himself waiting in the car, not just his driver. How is he? He asked as soon as I slid into the seat beside him. Stable. He'll recover. I leaned my head back against the seat, suddenly too tired to maintain the careful distance we'd been keeping. Thank you for coming. Dante reached for my hand, his warm fingers wrapping around mine. I wanted to be here for you. The simple words broke something in me. Tears came, hot and fast, spilling down my cheeks. I've been so stupid, I sobbed, so focused on myself, on my feelings, on what I want. Meanwhile, my parents are struggling, my father's heart is failing, and I've been taking care of a man who forced his way into your life, Dante finished, his voice gentle. A man who brought danger to your door and asked you to accept a world you never chose. But I did choose, I said, looking up at him through tears. Somewhere along the way, I chose you. I'm just afraid of what that means. Dante pulled me against his chest, his arms strong around me. It means whatever we want it to mean. We make the rules for us, Sophia. When we got back to the penthouse, I was surprised to find Salvatore waiting. His face was grim, and he and Dante exchanged a look I couldn't read. What's happened? I asked, suddenly alert despite my exhaustion. Business, Dante said, in the way that meant it was something I wouldn't want to know about. Don't do that, I said firmly. Don't shut me out. Not anymore. Dante and Salvatore exchanged another look. Then Dante sighed. The Rossis have made their move. They attacked one of our warehouses tonight. Was anyone hurt? My nurse's instincts kicked in immediately. 2 of our men? Minor injuries, Salvatore reported. But the message is clear. They're not backing down. So what happens now? I asked, though I was afraid I knew the answer. Now I respond, Dante said, his voice hardening in a way I hadn't heard since he'd woken from his coma. I remind them why the Vitale family has held power in this city for 3 generations. With violence, I said, not a question but a statement. Dante didn't deny it. This is my world, Sophia. These are the rules. I thought about my father in the hospital bed, fragile but alive, about my mother's tired face and worried eyes, about the life I'd lived before all this, simple, safe, but somehow less real than what I had now. There has to be another way, I said suddenly. Something besides more fighting, more blood. Dante's expression softened slightly. What do you suggest? I thought about my work at the hospital, how sometimes the most difficult patients needed a different approach. Have you tried talking to them? Finding out what they really want? Salvatore made a dismissive noise, but Dante looked thoughtful. The Rossis and the Vitales have been enemies for generations. Blood feuds don't end with conversation. But they could, I insisted, if someone was brave enough to try something different. Later that night, after Salvatore had left and we were alone, Dante found me on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. He stood behind me, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders. You've changed me, he said quietly. I turned to face him. How? Before you, I never questioned the way things were done, the rules I live by. His fingers traced my cheek. You make me want to be a better man. I don't want to change you, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. I just want you to be safe. I want us to have a chance. And if I told you I was considering your suggestion, finding a way to end this without more bloodshed? Hope fluttered in my chest. You'd do that? For you? His dark eyes held mine. I'd try. The next morning, I returned to the hospital to check on my father. He was looking better, some color back in his cheeks. As I sat beside his bed, holding his hand, my phone rang. Dante's name flashed on the screen. I'm meeting with Paolo Rossi tonight, he said without preamble, to discuss terms. My heart jumped into my throat. Is that safe? No, he answered honestly. But it's necessary. If we're going to have a future, a real future, this has to end. Let me come with you, I said impulsively. His refusal was immediate. Absolutely not, it's too dangerous. That's exactly why I should be there, I argued. The Rossis targeted me specifically with that message. They know I'm important to you. If they see us together, united, it sends a message. Or it puts you directly in harm's way, Dante countered. I won't risk you. It's not your choice to make, I said firmly. It's mine, and I choose to stand with you. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Finally, Dante sighed. You are the most stubborn woman I've ever met. Is that a yes? We'll discuss this when you get home. When I returned to the penthouse that afternoon, I found Dante in his office with Salvatore and two other men I recognized as part of his inner circle. They fell silent when I entered. Don't stop on my account, I said, crossing to stand beside Dante's chair. If I'm going to be there tonight, I should know the plan. Salvatore's eyebrows shot up. She's going? Have you lost your mind? She's my wife, Dante said, his voice leaving no room for argument. And she's made her choice. I felt a surge of pride at his words. Not just that he acknowledged me as his wife, truly his wife, not just on paper, but that he respected my choice, even if he didn't agree with it. As the men discussed security arrangements and escape routes, I studied Dante's face. The strong jaw, the dark eyes that could look so cold to others but warm when they looked at me, the small scar near his mouth that I knew now came from a childhood fight. I'd fallen in love with this man, complicated and dangerous as he was. And tonight, I would stand beside him as he tried to make peace instead of war. It was a small step, but maybe the beginning of something new for both of us. As the others left to prepare for the meeting, Dante pulled me into his arms. Are you sure about this? He asked, searching my face. Once you step into that room with me, there's no going back. You'll be seen as truly part of my world. I thought about what my father had said. What could I live with? What couldn't I live without? I'm sure, I said, reaching up to touch his face. Whatever happens, we face it together. 1 year after I signed that strange marriage certificate beside a comatose stranger, I stood in our penthouse looking out at the city lights. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, making the windows of the building shine like jewels. Behind me, I could hear the sounds of people talking and laughing in our dining room. The warm smell of my mother's cooking filled the air, mixed with the scent of fresh flowers that Dante had brought home that morning. Happy anniversary, he had said, handing me a huge bunch of daisies, not fancy roses or expensive orchids, but simple daisies because he knew they were my favorite. Now our families were gathered to celebrate that anniversary, my parents and Dante's family, together in one room. My father looked healthy again. His heart attack now just a scary memory. He sat at the head of the table telling loud stories about me as a little girl that made everyone laugh. My mother moved around the table, making sure everyone had enough food, patting Dante on the shoulder as she passed him. She had finally accepted him as my husband, though she still didn't know exactly what his import business really was. Salvatore was there too, smiling more than I'd ever seen in the early days, He'd become almost like an uncle to me, protective and kind in his own gruff way. And Maria, who still ran our household with quiet efficiency, was sitting beside him, their hands occasionally touching when they thought no one was looking. I felt Dante before I saw him, his presence a familiar warmth at my back, his arms wrapped around my waist, and he rested his chin on my shoulder. "Hiding from our guests?" he asked softly, his breath warm against my ear. I leaned back against his solid chest, feeling safe in his embrace. Just thinking about everything that's happened, how differently things could have gone. Dante turned me to face him, his dark eyes serious as they studied my face. His hands found mine, his fingers playing with the wedding band he'd placed there during our second wedding ceremony 6 months ago, a real ceremony where I walked down the aisle in a white dress, my eyes never leaving his as I said vows I truly meant this time. "Do you have regrets?" he asked, a hint of his old uncertainty in his voice. I shook my head, reaching up to touch his face. Only that we wasted so much time fighting what was happening between us. The man who stood before me now was neither the broken patient I'd nursed back to health, nor the feared boss others saw. He was simply mine, still strong, still dangerous when he needed to be, but gentler too, more thoughtful, more willing to find new ways to solve old problems. That night at the meeting with Paolo Rossi had changed everything. I still remembered how scared I'd been, walking into that restaurant with Dante, feeling the eyes of everyone watching us. Paolo Rossi had been an older man with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. "So this is the nurse who tamed the beast," he'd said, looking me up and down like I was a curiosity. "My wife," Dante had corrected, his hand steady on my back. The negotiations had been tense, full of words that meant more than they seemed, but in the end, a truce had been reached. The Rossis would stay out of Vitale territory, and Dante would allow them certain shipping rights they'd been wanting. There had been more to it, details I didn't fully understand, but the important part was that the bloodshed stopped. In the months that followed, Dante had surprised everyone by continuing to look for peaceful solutions to old conflicts. Some of his men didn't like the changes, clinging to the old ways, but most saw the wisdom in less violence, less attention from the police. "Your father cornered me earlier," Dante said now, pulling me back to the present. His smile was small, but real. "Asked when we planned to give him grandchildren." The question sent a flutter through me. We'd talked about children before, both wanting a family but aware of the complications our name would bring. "And what did you tell him?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Dante's hand moved to rest gently against my stomach, still flat but holding our secret. "That some announcements deserve their own special moment." My breath caught. "You know?" "Your doctor called to confirm the appointment," he admitted, pride and wonder mixing in his expression. "Were you going to tell me tonight?" I wanted to be sure first. I covered his hand with mine. "Are you happy?" His answer came not in words, but in the kiss that followed, tender at first, then deepening with a passion that still surprised me after all this time. A discreet cough interrupted us. Salvatore stood in the doorway, his usual serious face softened by the special occasion. "They're waiting for the toast, boss," he said, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. Dante kept his arm around me as we rejoined our guests. Everyone looked up as we entered, glasses ready for the toast they'd been waiting for. For a moment, the strangeness of my journey washed over me, from ordinary nurse to wife of one of the most powerful men in the city, from someone who followed rules to someone who now helped make them. "To unlikely beginnings," Dante said, raising his glass, his eyes never left mine. "And unexpected joy?" I added, thinking of the tiny life growing inside me. Later that night, as our guests left and the penthouse grew quiet, Dante found me in what had once been his study, but had gradually become ours. The wedding photo I'd discovered during our separation now held the place of honor on his desk. "Did you ever imagine this is where we'd end up?" I asked as he pulled me close. "When you woke up and found yourself married to your nurse?" "Never," he admitted, his strong arms warm around me. "But now I can't imagine any other life." Neither could I. The ordinary existence I'd once lived had been comfortable, but somehow less alive than what I had now. Yes, there were still dangers in Dante's world. There were still men who came to the penthouse to discuss business I didn't ask about. There were still guards who watched our home and followed me when I went to work 3 days a week at a free clinic Dante had helped fund. But there was also this connection, this love, this family we were building. Dante had changed, finding ways to move more of his business into legitimate channels. I had changed too, becoming stronger, more confident, less afraid of the complicated reality of life. I talked to my parents about the beach house, I told Dante as we swayed together in a slow dance to music only we could hear. "They love the idea of retiring there." Dante nodded, his cheek against my hair. "It's close enough to visit often, but far enough to be safe." "And the restaurant?" "My cousin Marco is excited to take it over." I smiled, thinking of how happy my father had been to keep the family business going, even as he stepped back from the daily work. "Dad's going to consult, of course. He can't help himself." "Sounds familiar," Dante said with a low chuckle. "Salvatore says I'm the same way with the new charity foundation. Always checking in, making suggestions." The Vitali Foundation had become Dante's passion over the past year, a legitimate way to use his money and influence to help the community. The free clinic was just one of many projects they funded, along with scholarships, housing programs, and support for struggling small businesses. "It's going to be different for our baby," I said softly, my hand moving to my stomach. "He or she won't grow up the way either of us did." "Better," Dante agreed. "Safer, but still strong." We moved to the window, looking out at the city that had once seemed so separate from my life, but was now home. Dante stood behind me, his arms around me, his chin resting on top of my head. "Are you happy, Sophia?" he asked quietly. I thought about the question, really thought about it. Was I happy with this complicated life we'd built? With the man who still carried darkness in him but fought every day to be better? With the future we were creating, step by careful step? Yes, I answered truthfully. Not because everything is perfect, but because we're facing it together. I felt his smile against my hair. "Together," he repeated. "That's all that matters." As we stood there in the quiet of our home, I thought about the strange path that had led me here. From a scared nurse forced into marriage with a man in a coma, to a woman who had found her strength, her voice, and her heart. Life had taught me that the most ordinary beginnings can lead to the most extraordinary journeys, that love can grow in the strangest soil, that sometimes the things that scare us most are exactly what we need to become who we're meant to be. Dante's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining as we watched the moon rise over our city. Whatever came next, parenthood, challenges, joy, or sorrow, we would face it as we had faced everything since that night in the hospital, together.